Single dad saved a woman in a blizzard. The next morning, she walked into his job as the CEO. It began on a night when the world itself seemed to have forgotten warmth. The snow fell in violent sheets, blanketing the earth in a cold, blinding white. The roads were silent except for the hum of an old pickup truck crawling through the storm. Inside, a man gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned pale. His name was Ethan Cole, a single father, a mechanic, and a man who had learned how to survive the hard way. The blizzard had forced him to close the shop early, but his thoughts weren't on work. They were on Lily, his 6-year-old daughter waiting at home. She hated when he was late. Ethan's world had been small since his wife passed 3 winters ago, just him, his little girl, and the quiet ache of trying to do everything alone. He had learned to measure his worth not by success, but by survival. Every snowstorm, every empty fridge, every long night, he endured them all for her. As he turned down the desolate county road, his headlights cut through a white curtain of snow, and that's when he saw it. A car, half buried in the ditch. The tail lights blinked faintly, almost swallowed by the blizzard. Ethan's heart clenched. He could have kept driving. Most would have. But something inside him refused. He stopped the truck, yanked on his coat, and plunged into the wind. The cold was merciless. Snow whipped across his face as he stumbled toward the wreck. Inside the car, a woman sat motionless, her face ghostly pale, eyes fluttering, breath fogging the glass. Her window wouldn't budge. He shouted, but the wind stole his voice. So he kicked at the glass until it cracked, reached in, and pulled the door open. Her pulse was weak, her hands trembling. Hypothermia was setting in fast. Without a second thought, Ethan lifted her out of the seat and carried her to his truck. She was light, too light. Her lips were blue. Her phone had no signal, and the nearest town was miles away. He didn't think about who she was, or what she might have been doing out there. He only knew one thing: she needed warmth, she needed safety, she needed saving. Ethan drove through the storm like a man racing time itself. When he finally reached his small cabin on the edge of town, he carried the woman inside, set her by the fire, and wrapped her in blankets. All night he stayed awake, feeding the fire, checking her pulse, making sure she didn't drift too far away. Lily, sleepy-eyed, came out of her room and asked if the woman was an angel. Ethan smiled faintly and said maybe she was. By dawn, the blizzard had broken. The first light of morning painted the frost-covered windows gold. The woman stirred, her eyes opening slowly, confusion mixing with gratitude. She tried to thank him, but her voice failed. Ethan only nodded and told her to rest. By the time she regained enough strength to stand, he had already made coffee, fixed her coat, and offered to drive her to town once the roads cleared. He didn't ask her name. And when she left later that morning, bundled in his old scarf, she looked back once as if memorizing the shape of his kindness. He thought that was the end of it. But fate had a strange sense of timing. The next morning, Ethan walked into work at Harper Industries Auto Division, where he'd been a mechanic for years, fixing engines, covered in grease, earning barely enough to scrape by. He clocked in, exchanged a few jokes with the guys, and went back to the bay to work on a broken company SUV. Then, the room fell silent. A sleek black car pulled into the lot. From it stepped a woman, elegant, confident, dressed in a long winter coat. Her heels clicked on the concrete as she entered the shop. Every mechanic stopped what they were doing. She was clearly someone important. The manager rushed out, his voice trembling as he greeted her. "Everyone, meet Ms. Evelyn Harper, he announced. Our new CEO. Ethan froze. Because standing there perfectly composed, her eyes steady, was the same woman he had rescued from the blizzard. Evelyn Harper. The woman whose car he had pulled from the snow. The woman he had carried through a storm. Their eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat, time stopped. Recognition flashed in hers, followed by something deeper. Gratitude. Wonder. She said nothing. Neither did he. But in that silence, an entire story passed between them. Over the next few days, whispers spread through the company. The new CEO was unlike any they'd ever had. She didn't sit in the corner office all day. She walked through the shop floors, talking to the workers, asking about their lives. And somehow, she always lingered near Ethan's bay. Ethan tried to keep things professional. He was just a mechanic. She was the CEO. Different worlds entirely. But she remembered every detail: the firelight, the warmth of his home, the way he stayed awake to make sure she survived. One afternoon, she approached him quietly as he worked. She watched his hands, strong, capable, worn by years of effort. Then, in the same calm tone she had the night she left his house, she said, "Sometimes, the people who fix engines, end up fixing lives." Ethan didn't look up. He didn't need to. He just smiled. Weeks passed. Snow melted. Spring came. But change was already in motion. Under Evelyn's leadership, Harper Industries began a new program, one that offered education, training, and advancement to single parents working in the company. She claimed it was inspired by an act of kindness. Ethan never took credit. He didn't want recognition. But when the announcement went out, and she caught his eye during the staff meeting, he knew it was for him. For people like him. For people who quietly gave all they had, never expecting anything in return. A year later, Ethan's life had transformed. He had been promoted to supervisor, his daughter had started school in a better district, and he finally had enough to breathe without fear of the next bill. But it wasn't the money that changed him, it was what he learned that night in the blizzard, that sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can ripple through lives far beyond our own. Evelyn never forgot either. Though their paths stayed professional, there was an unspoken bond, the kind that forms when two lives collide at the exact moment fate decides they must. On the anniversary of the blizzard, she visited his shop again. Outside, the snow was falling gentle this time, like a memory. She placed a small envelope on his workbench. Inside was a handwritten note: "You saved me that night. But you also reminded me what leadership really means, to see the people who keep the world running. Thank you, Ethan." Beneath the note was a scholarship certificate in his daughter's name. Full tuition. Full future. Ethan stood there for a long time, the sound of the falling snow echoing like applause. He looked up toward the sky, that endless, white horizon, and for the first time in years, he felt peace. Because sometimes, the storms we survive lead us to the people we were meant to find. And sometimes, the act of saving a stranger becomes the very thing that saves us in return. Moral: kindness has a way of coming back, often when we least expect it, often multiplied. In a world that can freeze hearts with cold indifference, it only takes one act of warmth to change everything.